There's a moment in every driver's career when the sport stops asking what you can give it and starts asking what it's already taken from you. For Alex Bowman, that moment arrived quietly on a Thursday, not in a press conference full of fanfare, but in a team release that changed the trajectory of one of the most unlikely success stories in the Cup Series garage. He's calling it a decision made at the right time. Everyone else is calling it the end of an era at Hendrick Motorsports. Bowman signed a one-year contract extension this week, and buried inside that extension was the real headline. This will be his last full-time season. When the checkered flag falls on 2027, the driver of the number 48 Chevrolet will step away from full-time Cup Series competition, closing out a career that started in a borrowed seat and ended up defining one of the sport's most storied numbers. To understand why this news lands so heavily, you have to go back to where Bowman actually came from. This isn't a story about a can't-miss prospect handed a golden opportunity. Bowman spent his early years grinding through underfunded, under-equipped teams, the kind of rides that chew drivers up and spit them out before anyone outside the sport ever learns their name. He was a nobody in a slow car, finishing races nobody remembers, in equipment that gave him no business competing with the sport's elite. Then, in 2015, driving for Tommy Baldwin Racing, he posted some of the worst average finishes of his career. It would have been easy to write him off right there, but somebody was watching. In 2016, Hendrick Motorsports needed a body in the seat of an injured Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s car, and Bowman got the call. He split time behind the wheel with a seven-time champion Jeff Gordon in one of the most pressure-soaked editions imaginable, stepping into a ride owned by NASCAR royalty while the sport's biggest fan base watched every lap for slip-ups. He didn't just survive it. He turned a temporary fill-in role into a full-time contract by 2018, taking over the number 88 car and never letting go of his seat at the sport's biggest table again. When Jimmie Johnson, a seven-time champion in his own right, retired after the 2020 season, Hendrick didn't hand the legendary number 48 to just anyone. They handed it to Bowman. Think about the weight of that. This is a number carried by one of the greatest drivers stock car racing has ever produced, and the organization trusted a former underdog from underfunded equipment to be its next steward. Bowman didn't shrink from it. He won at least once every season from 2019 through 2022, strung together a career-best sixth-place points finish in 2020, and then in 2021, put together the best season of his career for wins that announced he wasn't just keeping the seat warm. He belonged. Rick Hendrick, the man who built the empire Bowman now represents, didn't hold back when describing what those years have meant. He said Bowman has meant so much to the organization for a long time that he's overcome adversity, won big races, and represented the team and its partners with professionalism, personality, and class. Hendrick called him a tremendous talent in the race car and an even better person outside of it. And then he said the four words that carry more weight than any statistic on a stat sheet. He's family. But behind every highlight reel, there's a body absorbing the cost of a brutal sport, and Bowman's has taken more than its share of hits. In 2022, concussion-like symptoms pulled him out of the car for 5 races, a stretch that forced him to confront just how fragile the line is between competing and simply surviving. The following spring, while sitting atop the Cup Series point standings, a sprint car crash away from NASCAR left him with a broken vertebra and sidelined him for 3 more races. Any of those injuries alone could have ended a career. Bowman kept coming back. In 2024, he found victory lane again at the Chicago Street Course, proof that whatever the sport had taken from him, it hadn't taken his ability to win. This season told a harder story. Vertigo cost him 4 races. As of this point in the year, he sits 29th in the standings with just 3 top 5 finishes and 4 top 10s through 17 starts, an average finishing position on pace to be his worst since those lean years at Tommy Baldwin Racing over a decade ago. For a driver who's tasted the top of the standings, who's carried Jimmie Johnson's number and Rick Hendrick's trust, that kind of season isn't just disappointing. It's a signal. And Bowman, by his own admission, has been listening to it. In his own words, he said he spent a lot of time thinking about what's next, and that this feels like the right decision at the right time. He talked about how much the sport asks of a driver and how he's learned the importance of listening to his own body and making the right choice for himself, not for the point standings, not for the sponsors, not for anyone else's timeline, but his own. That's not the language of a driver being pushed out. That's the language of a man choosing his own ending on his own terms, while he still has something left to give. And make no mistake, he insists there's still plenty left to give. Bowman was direct about it. His focus now is on making the most of his time on the track and competing for wins. There's still a lot to accomplish, he said, and he wants to close his career on a high note for his team and for the fans who followed him from those underfunded early days all the way to Hendrick Motorsports storied halls. He called the chance to do that with this organization, with these people really special. After everything, after the crashes, the vertigo, the concussions, the broken vertebra, that gratitude is still the first thing he reaches for. There's something almost poetic about how this story is shaping up. A driver who started in cars nobody wanted to sponsor, sharing a legendary seat as an emergency fill-in, inheriting a number carried by a 7-time champion, and choosing on his own terms when to let it go. 12 full seasons, 8 wins, a 4-win year that will forever stand as his career peak. And now, 1 more season and a half to write the final chapter himself. Hendrick Motorsports isn't losing a driver at the end of 2027. They're losing a piece of their own family history, a man Rick Hendrick himself says has meant everything to the organization. But for now, the story isn't over. Bowman still has a car to drive, races to win, and a fan base hoping the final lap of his full-time career looks a lot like the moment he first climbed into that borrowed seat back in 2016. A driver with everything to prove and just enough time left to prove it.